I was sitting in the small conference room at the law office, my hand resting on the unsigned divorce papers. The room was so quiet, I could hear the second hand slide over each mark. Then the door opened. A man walked in. No knock, no waiting. He pulled out a chair and set a black briefcase on the table. The metal locks clicked open. I looked down at the cash packed tightly inside. He didn't look at the case, only at me, as he said one short line, cold enough to pull the air tight. You've become their entertainment. I'm not letting them use you again. I didn't ask who they were. I just capped my pen. Some truths don't need to be said out loud for you to know they'll change the entire story. To understand that moment, I have to go back to when everything was still calm, when I still believed I had a steady marriage. I'm Kara, a book editor at a mid-sized publisher. My job forces me to read closely and listen even closer, a habit that makes it easy to catch the odd quiet spots in someone's voice. I'm reserved and I like things neat. I'm not the kind of person who treats noise as a way of life. My husband, Ben, is the opposite. He works in marketing at a tech company and lives by drawing attention. He likes parties, likes telling stories, likes being seen. In a way, that contrast used to keep us balanced, but balance tips. And it tips so slightly, so slowly that if I weren't used to observing, I might have missed it. It started with small shifts in his schedule. Ben said the company was expanding and the new project needed him. I didn't dig. Everyone needs space to grow. But then he started bragging about vague wins. Lines like, the project's getting huge, or you're going to be shocked by the results. And every time I asked for specifics, he brushed it off like I wouldn't get the marketing lingo. I just nodded, filing it away as a detail that didn't fit in a story that hadn't taken shape yet. Then came the dinners. We used to eat together and talk about our day. But lately, Ben liked to toss in these small, sharp comments. Not harsh enough to be a real insult, just enough to sting like a paper cut. You're always so quiet. Bet your coworkers just love that. Or, telling stories to you feels like a waste sometimes. You don't care about anything lively. I set my knife down and looked at him. Not angry, just taking stock. I wanted to see who he was trying to impress. I knew one thing well. Men don't change their tone with their wife unless they feel watched from somewhere else. I didn't ask, didn't argue. Someone who needs to use little jabs to lift himself up is missing something. Fighting would only turn me into his stage. Then came that night, the moment that drew a line in my head. We were invited to a gala hosted by a partner company. Ben said it was important and he wanted me with him. I picked a simple black dress, pulled my hair back, and waited in the lobby. He texted saying he'd come after a meeting. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. His message finally came. Just go in first. I'm tied up. Figure it out. No apology. No sign he even tried. I stood in the crowded lobby, lights hitting the stone floor. And suddenly it felt like I had stepped out of a marriage he no longer cared to hold on to. I turned around and went home without a word to anyone. The next morning, I found a lawyer. Not out of anger, not out of hurt. Just because I knew the respect between us had fallen somewhere along the road we walked together, and I had no interest in picking it back up. So here I was, in a small conference room, with the divorce papers open in front of me, and across the table was Mark, a man I had never met. He kept the briefcase open, like the $50 million was only a tool to force the story to start. I looked him in the eye, calm, waiting for him to continue, but he didn't. Mark leaned back in his chair, carrying the tired look of someone who had seen too much filth behind walls most people thought were polished. His one line still hung in the air. You've become their entertainment. Who they were, why it was me, and why he brought $50 million. All of it sat there like a knot waiting to be pulled. I closed the divorce file, not to back out, just to hear the whole truth before I signed, and before I left this marriage on my own terms. I shut the folder after Mark walked out. The door closed and the room went quiet again, but the air wasn't the same. This silence was heavier. It made me replay every small crease in the past months, details that meant nothing alone, but, set side by side, formed something unpleasant. I stepped out of the law office and stopped on the sidewalk, my hand still tight on my bag strap like my body hadn't caught up with the shift in my head. $50 million, one sentence, and a truth still waiting to surface. I took a breath and started walking, not fast, not shaken, just slipping back into my own story by tracing the signs I'd ignored. It all began with the messages. I remember that night clearly. Ben's phone lit up beside him while he was in the shower. The screen only showed a faint notification. We're on track. There was no name, no photo, just a passing message. I set the phone back exactly where it was. When Ben stepped out, he looked at the screen, then at me, and gave this half smile full of smugness. Just a client, he said. Didn't wait for me to ask. But that wasn't the smile of someone who'd landed a deal. It was the smile of someone who thought he held the upper hand in a game he wasn't mentioning. I didn't say anything, just nodded. In the weeks that followed, that smugness grew. Ben lingered in front of the mirror, fussing with his shirt, fixing his hair over and over like he was getting ready to be on camera. But when he was with me, he was cold, as if he were performing a role he no longer cared about. The touches were the first to disappear, then the half-hearted kisses, then the silence in bed, the kind that isn't about being tired, but about someone's mind being somewhere else. Each change was a small cut, not painful at first, but it left a mark. One night, I went downstairs for water. Ben was on the phone in his office, the door only partly closed. His voice was soft, almost casual, and I heard one line clearly, so clearly it made me stop. She hasn't suspected anything. I didn't mishear it. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't flinch when he heard my steps. When I pushed the office door open to grab a notebook, he only glanced at me with this unsettling calm, like me hearing it was part of whatever he had planned. I took the notebook and closed the door gently. No questions, no confrontation. What I needed then wasn't an answer. I wanted to see how he planned to keep playing his part. A few days later, I opened Ben's laptop to send him a report file he'd asked me to fix. I'm not someone who snoops, but when I plugged in the USB, a folder popped up, a virtual one, hidden but not very deep. Inside were 4 audio files. I opened the first. Laughter, Ben's. A second laugh followed, a woman's, young, sharp, confident. Then a line that made my palms go numb. Let's see how long it takes her to notice. And Ben answered, I bet longer than you think. I closed the file and shut the laptop. The screen reflected my face, not angry, not scared, just still, like I was looking at a version of myself from a distance. A woman being set on the scales of a game she never signed up for. I sat down, fingers laced. I wasn't shocked that Ben was cheating. I was shocked by how he talked about me, like I was an experiment, a case study, a bet. I didn't open the other files. I didn't need to. One told me everything. What I wanted was to watch him while he thought I knew nothing. So I stayed quiet. Quiet enough that Ben kept believing I was exactly what he imagined. Slow, naive, predictable. After that, every small detail became even clearer. Ben came home late, but always carried himself like he just won something. He said harmless, casual things, but his eyes kept searching my reactions, like he was adding notes to a tracking chart. Once, while I was peeling an apple in the kitchen, Ben walked up, stood behind me, and said, I thought you'd ask me a few things, but you haven't asked anything. I turned the knife in my hand, then set it on the cutting board. Why would I ask? Ben smiled. The smile of someone who thinks he holds the entire deck. No reason, just curious. Curious. A very interesting word coming from someone testing your limits. The peak was that Saturday night. We were getting ready to have dinner with his friends. Ben was picking a shirt, changing into a third one. I sat on the bed, tying my hair, listening to him mumble at the mirror. They'll want to see me win big tonight. I looked at him through the mirror. Win what? He blinked, then smiled. Just a figure of speech. Don't worry about it. A half answer. Smug. Like someone waiting for applause for a performance only he could see. That night, when we got home, Ben went to shower. His phone was on the table, screen lit. A message came in from the woman in the recordings. Just one line. I still think she'll figure it out sooner. No emoji, no exclamation point. Just a sentence from someone discussing me like a data point. I didn't open it. I just watched it fade when the screen went dark. The next morning, I knew one thing for sure. Ben wasn't just cheating, he was betting. And the subject of the bet was my reaction. No one loves their wife and talks about her like an experiment. No one respects their partner and debates how long she'll take to notice the betrayal. And the moment I understood that, a cold ran down my spine, the kind that comes from perfect clarity. Not because I lost Ben, but because I lost the illusion that he'd ever seen me as a person. With all the memories lined up, I finally understood part of what Mark meant. They weren't just Ben and his mistress. There were others behind this twisted game. To them, I wasn't a wife. I was a target, a number in a bet, someone to measure, to see when she would crack. And that truth, not the affair, was what chilled me the most. I returned to the lawyer's conference room with a completely different state of mind. Earlier, I only had scattered clues. Now I had a frame. And the man in front of me, Mark, was the missing piece. He sat calmly at the end of the table, hands clasped, watching me like he was waiting to see how I'd receive what came next. I pulled out my chair, sat down, and kept my gaze cold. Why 50 million, I asked. And why are you the one bringing it? Mark leaned back slightly and let out a breath, as if he'd been holding this answer for a long time. Because I'm the one most directly involved, he said, and because no one else has a good enough reason to tell you the truth. He paused, choosing his words. Then he continued, steady, without any extra emotion. Ben is having an affair with my wife. Not a painful confession, just a bare fact laid on the table. I didn't react. I wasn't surprised. Everything I'd seen and heard before this made his statement feel like a formality. Mark nodded slightly, as if acknowledging how steady I was. At first, I thought it was just an affair, he said. I planned to handle it on my own, but then... He let out a quiet laugh, the kind you make when you've stopped believing in people. I heard a recording. I straightened a bit. Mark met my eyes without looking away. Ben and my wife were talking about you, he said slowly, clearly, and they were betting with their friends on how long it would take you to find out about the affair. The room felt a few degrees colder. I didn't move. It was like standing in snow. Sharp cold, not numbing, just making your mind clearer. I heard it during a call my wife thought I wasn't home for, Mark went on. They talked about the timeline. They were counting days. They even placed the first bet on whether you'd notice. Ben, the man who once called me the most perceptive person in the room, now betting on my blindness. Mark turned a pen between his fingers, his voice dropping. But that was only the first layer. I watched him, didn't rush, just waited. Layer 2, Mark said, is what made me decide I had to find you. He paused, as if making sure I was ready to hear it. I'd been ready for a long time. They weren't only betting on the timing. I waited for the rest, and it came down like a clean cut. They were betting on how you'd react when you learned you were being cheated on. The words hit the table like something heavy, but I didn't blink. The fragments I'd gathered, texts, laughter, the way Ben watched me snapped into place. Mark went on. A group of Ben's friends joined in. Some bet you'd cry. Some bet you'd stay. Others thought you'd blow up, beg, or smash things. He looked at me for a beat longer, but Ben bet on the silent endurance option. My heartbeat didn't spike. It stayed steady, cold, like my body had decided to toss out anything unnecessary. Ben said, Mark continued, she's not the explosive type. She'll take it. She'll hurt pretty. I leaned back slightly. Hurt pretty. A cruel choice of words, but accurate. Ben knew me well, but not to cherish me, to wager on me. Mark watched me, his voice even, which made each word sharper. To win, Ben adjusted how he treated you for months, sometimes soft, sometimes cold, sometimes belittling, sometimes distant. All of it designed to see if you'd crack. I let out a small breath, not from shock, from finally having an explanation for all of Ben's senseless behavior. It hadn't been senseless at all. It had a purpose, and I was the experiment. The final layer, Mark said, is why I brought the 50 million. He pushed the briefcase toward me, as if its significance wasn't just in the money. 50 million, he said, is the total pot of their bet. I found a way to take it back, not because I need it, and not to buy your silence. I looked at the briefcase, then at Mark. He was telling the truth, plainly. I'm giving it to you for one reason, he went on. You're not the one who should pay for their filth. I rested my hands on the table, fingers laced. The feeling wasn't anger. It was clarity so sharp it felt quiet. Does Ben know you're talking to me? I asked. Mark leaned back and gave a small nod. He does now. His answer landed like the abrupt end of a cut-off song. No more explanation needed. No more details. Ben knew. He would react. And I finally knew I was standing at the center of a game he thought I'd never reach. I stood at my front door for a moment before unlocking it. Not to steady myself. I already was steady. I just wanted to enter this moment with a quiet mind. The door opened. The living room lights were on. Ben was on the sofa, leaning back slightly, one arm draped over the backrest. The confident pose of someone who believed he still held the upper hand. He looked at me as if he'd already pictured me walking in, with wide, frantic eyes and a pile of shaky questions. I closed the door behind me, said nothing. Ben's smile tugged upward, barely an unmistakable sign that he thought I'd found some clue, but not enough to do anything but fall apart. He stood. Kara, I know today must have been rough, but how long until you won the bet? I asked. The question cut through the room like metal striking metal. No build-up, no detour, just a straight slice to the place he'd been hiding. Ben froze. For 1 second, I watched the mask crack. His eyes stalled, like his brain needed time to process the fact that I had gone straight to the center of his game. Kara, what are you talking about? He tried to keep his voice steady. I stepped closer, not raising my voice, not showing anything but absolute stillness. I'm asking, I repeated, how long you thought it would take to win? Ben opened his mouth to deny it, then shut it again when I didn't look away. His breath shifted. His shoulders tightened. This was the first moment he realized his script had slipped out of his hands. I stopped a few steps from him. You didn't just cheat on me, I said, my voice low and sharp like cold glass. You played me, and you already lost. Ben backed up half a step. Not much, but enough for me to see the hit had landed exactly where it needed to. You must have heard someone twisting things, he said, trying to salvage it with a strained smile. I just... Heard? I tilted my head. I heard you. My calm rattled him faster than any shouting could. He moved closer, lowering his voice to that fake softness he used with clients when he was trying to patch a mistake. Kara, you misunderstood. It was a joke between friends. Someone recorded it, edited it. I took out my phone and played the file Mark had sent. Not all of it, just the part that mattered. The living room filled with laughter, Ben's and hers, too real to deny. Then the woman's voice. How long until she notices? And Ben's voice, clear and smug. She'll stay quiet. I'm betting on that. I turned the file off. No comment, no question. I just looked at him, waiting for him to face the bare truth of himself. Ben lifted a hand as if trying to pull the air back toward him. Kara, let me explain. No. One short word. Enough to cut through every attempt he had left. He had no idea what to do with my calm. Ben was used to tears, reactions, or at the very least a rush of questions that would give him a chance to steer the game back into his hands. But none of those showed up. And that was what scared him. I put my phone away, then took out another one, the one I only used for work. I opened my contacts, selected Ben's group of friends, the ones who joined the bet. What are you doing? Ben blurted, his voice jumping half a pitch. I didn't answer. I just sent the recording to all of them. One tap. No message. No note. The truth didn't need a caption. Ben's phone started buzzing a few seconds later. Then ding. Then another ding. Then call after call. From the very people he tried so hard to impress. He looked at the screen, and his whole expression shifted. The smugness shattered, leaving raw panic he never imagined he'd have to show me. Kara, don't do this. This could ruin my career. Oh. I tilted my head. So now it hurts. Ben gripped his phone, staring at me with a mix of anger and fear, the blend that only shows up when someone realizes they miscalculated their opponent. Kara, just listen. But I wasn't standing there anymore. I turned and walked toward the door. Not fast, not dramatic. Each step was a period dropped firmly onto the end of a sentence. Kara, Ben shouted. You can't just walk out like this. You have to let me explain. My hand touched the doorknob. I paused for exactly one beat. Ben, I said, my voice so calm it made the words cut sharper. I don't need to beat you. I just need to stop staying where you get to play me. I opened the door. I didn't wait to see how his face fell apart, and I stepped out, leaving behind a house full of everything that used to be my life and everything I no longer intended to belong to. My strength wasn't in yelling. It was in this moment. I left before he could justify a thing. I finalized the divorce on a pale gray morning. All the papers were signed quickly, cleanly. Not once did I turn to look at the door where Ben had shown up in the first few meetings. He texted me over and over long messages, short ones, soft ones, frantic ones, the scattered pieces of a man trying to patch a story he'd torn apart himself. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because nothing in those messages had anything to do with me anymore. His name disappeared from the appointments. Mine slipped out of that marriage lighter than I expected. The fallout hit Ben faster than he ever imagined. The recording spread among his friends in a matter of hours before someone leaked it. No one knows who posted it first, but social media swarmed like wolves catching the scent of blood. They called it the most disgusting bet we've heard in years. The comments didn't bother with decoration, just his name, tied to questions sharp as knives, the kind he had no skill to spin into a marketing advantage. His company issued an internal notice the next day. Then he was put on leave. Then every one of his posts was flooded with people quoting the line, "She'll stay quiet." I'm betting on that. A line he once used as his winning strategy, now the anchor dragging his reputation under. Ben's Mistress, Mark's wife, vanished from his life so fast it was clear they didn't even get a final meeting. When the scandal broke, she left him one message: "Don't drag me into this." I saw it when Mark showed me. One sentence, and everything that used to be their little allied game suddenly became a burden Ben had to carry alone. And that was a cold kind of justice. A few days later, Mark asked to meet me at a small place near the courthouse. Not fancy, just quiet enough to talk without raising our voices. I arrived on time. He was already there, hands wrapped around his glass like someone who'd been sitting through a long storm. When I pulled out the chair, he looked at me without the guarded expression he'd had the first time we met. "Thank you," he said, "for not staying silent." I tilted my head slightly. "I didn't do much." Mark let out a slow breath. "You did the thing I always hoped my wife would do when she betrayed me. Face the truth and put it exactly where it belongs." There was a moment of quiet, not heavy, just a needed pause for two people who had stood on opposite ends of the same wound to realize they were never enemies. I looked straight at him. I just put the truth back where it belonged. The words came out clean and sharp, like the final cut across a sheet of ice that had been cracked for a long time. Mark nodded. He understood. And that was enough. We didn't talk much after that. There was no need to trade pain or lessons. Some alliances form on a single truth and end with a simple nod. I left the cafe as the sun started to break through. A thin strip of light sliced across the wet pavement and bounced off the glass of a distant building. I walked with an easy step, not trying to be strong, not trying to forget what happened. I didn't want to forget. I wanted everything to stay exactly where it belonged, behind me, like a finished chapter with a bold final line and no footnotes. I don't hate Ben. And that isn't grace. It's simply because hatred means I still care about the person who caused it. I don't regret anything. And I don't see myself as a victim. I'm just someone who walked out of a cruel game without letting it define me. People like to say betrayal changes you. Maybe that's true. But for me, it only made my path clearer, like someone finally turned on a light in a room I'd gotten used to navigating in the dark. I slowed down a little, read more, slept easier, and no longer waited for someone to come home so we could start a forced conversation. Life didn't get dramatic after I left. It just got the right kind of light. A few months later, I heard Ben had switched jobs. His old company didn't want the scandal, and the people who once sat at the same table betting with him disappeared. He lost everything he used to brag about as his greatest assets, other people's respect. I read the update, then closed my laptop. Not happy, not sad. Just a piece of information that had nothing to do with my life anymore. People asked why I didn't sue, or demand compensation, or take revenge in some dramatic way. I just smiled. I didn't need to do anything else. Ben destroyed himself with his own hands. I only held up the mirror. He looked, and the rest collapsed on its own. I stopped at the crosswalk and watched the signal change. A light breeze brushed my sleeve, cool but not unpleasant. It felt like the quiet peace of a door closing without a sound. I thought about my story, not as a tragedy, but as a lesson in boundaries. When someone treats you like a game, walking away is the cleanest strike back. I stepped onto the street when the light turned green, and in that moment, one line came to me, short, sharp, and true to everything that happened. He used me to win a bet, but what he lost in the end was the life he'd been bragging about. And I kept walking without looking back. In the end, here's what I learned. When someone treats you like a game, the way you stand up and leave is the strongest answer you can give. Self-respect doesn't need noise, just timing. That's the end of this story. Thank you for listening all the way through. If you were in my place, would you walk away right away or show them exactly how awake you are? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for the next stories.